If the New Orleans Saints want to get back to the playoffs in 2023, they've got a lot of work to do, and they need to get started now. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, we're free and available on all podcast apps and on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert, credentialed member of the media, CrescentCitySports.com, USA Today Saints Wire, Tuesdays in Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. And today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at Bet Online. We got more odds, lines, and props than ever before. Bet Online, where the game starts. On today's episode, we're taking a look at the top three things the New Orleans Saints need to do if they want to get back to the playoffs in 2023. So we're going to be starting off, of course, looking at the quarterback situation. We're going to discuss trading Sean Payton, but it all starts on how they improve their own coaching staff, not just the coach that they're sending out to somebody else's job. You also notice we have a different, if you're watching over on the video side, we have a little bit of a new kind of look here, just opening things up, going to move some stuff out. You know, now that we're into the off season and I've got more time, I'm going to try to gussy things up a little bit for you as well. So as we get started with today's episode, the first thing that I want to highlight is the New Orleans Saints needing to make a change at offensive coordinator. Like, let's just call it what it is at this point, right? I mean, Pete Carmichael, it's nothing against him. It's no personal attack, anything like that. He was phenomenal for the Saints the decade or so that he spent with the team, along with Sean Payton. But getting that opportunity without Payton, without Breeze, to step into a play calling role in 2022, it didn't work out. And so I would be very surprised if the New Orleans Saints moved into 2023 with the same setup. I don't see that being the case. You've seen other folks observe that as well. And so if the Saints want to get back to the playoffs in 2023, the first thing they need to do is figure out their offense. And that all starts at offensive coordinator. The Saints and Dennis Allen, they're moving forward together. So it's in Dennis Allen's best interest to put the offense in the hands of somebody that's going to bring creativity, that doesn't have you answering questions in a press conference in December saying we got to find more creative ways to get Alvin Kamara involved in December. Like, that can't be the case. You can't be put in that situation as a head coach. So finding guys that are out there that are going to be able to come in and infuse a little bit of creativity, that are going to have an identity for this offense right off the bat, is massively important for the New Orleans Saints. They didn't have that in 2022. They just simply didn't. I mean, we thought they were going to be a defensively led team that was going to, focus on keeping the ball on the ground. And then all of a sudden they ended up in a 16-point hole to open up the season and, came back, of course, to win that game, the largest deficit of comeback in New Orleans Saints history, thanks to Jameis Winston and Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry and Chris Olave. And then 4 weeks later, we didn't see three of those players for the rest of the season. So what was the identity after that? You had to change quarterbacks. You had to change everything about what it is that you were going to be. And the one player that was mostly consistent for you throughout the season, at least as a presence, sans a couple of games, was Alvin Kamara. And even though this was a team that wanted to be a run-heavy team, they would hardly put the ball in his hands, and he was off the field on third downs. He was off the field in the red zone, wasn't getting red zone touches. You had Taysom Hill, who, was getting his touches every other game or so, or every 3 or 4 games or so. The Saints just really were an offense that just seemed completely lost throughout the season, had no idea who they were. You can't have that going into 2023. And if you want to fix that, one of the easiest ways to fix that and most direct ways to fix that is to change who's in control of the offense. So let me not just ramble on and on about who the option, about making the change. Let's talk about some options. We've discussed Mike LaFleur, not Matt LaFleur, his brother, who was originally the passing game coordinator with the San Francisco 49ers, then ended up going and taking over as offensive coordinator with the New York Jets. The New York Jets absolutely fell apart this season as their quarterback situation fell apart, as their running back got hurt, all these other things, and they lost a running back for the season in Bryce Hall. And then all of a sudden, Mike LaFleur is out. And so great, that's going to be somebody else's opportunity there because Mike LaFleur is a really, really good coach and he's a great offensive mind coming from that Shanahan tree, which is where the NFL is going. And it's one of the reasons why I refer to the New Orleans Saints offense of 2022 as a little bit of an outdated approach, not running outside the tackles, not utilizing motion. At one point early on in the season, they were second to last in the NFL when using motion. And when they use motion, and that's pre-snap motion, when they use motion at the snap, so they snap the ball and you see somebody crossing the line of scrimmage, for instance, or crossing behind the formation, things like that. There's sort of split zone runs that they would run where you have a tight end pulling from one side to the other side, lead blocking for Taysom Hill, for instance. They ran that at snap motion on 31% of their run plays, but only 1% of their passing plays. So it was a tell more than it was anything creative. Mike LaFleur brings a motion-heavy offense that includes a ton of misdirection that's in that sort of Gibbs counter gap scheme and blending that with the West Coast attacking short intermediate, safe passing. Those are the things that the New Orleans Saints have lived on over the course of their time with creative offense, but taking it into modernity is something that I think would be good. Another guy to watch out for would be the current passing game coordinator, Bobby Slowick, over with the San Francisco 49ers. He's a name to watch, but it doesn't stop there. The Saints actually have an in-house option, and I don't know if they're going to go this route because they went the stay at home and go the in-house route situation last year, and we saw how that worked out for them. So they might say, hey, let's go external this time, which makes perfect sense. But I do want to shout them out. There is still Ronald Curry in the building, and I'm going to bring something up for you if you're watching over on the YouTube side here, but don't worry, I'll explain it on the audio side as well. Ronald Curry was named the offensive coordinator for the national team of this year's Reese's Senior Bowl. So that's a huge deal for Ronald Curry, who has seen his coaching, profile get, larger and larger and larger, get more and more and more attention over the course of the last few years as he has come through and done, built from being a wide receiver coach or working with wide receivers to being a quarterback coach, pass game coordinator. He's on an offensive coordinator trajectory. So whether he does it with the New Orleans Saints or he does it elsewhere, that's eventually where he's headed. He'll get his first shot at it over with the Reese's Senior Bowl, which also gives the Saints a really unique bit of access into this year's draft class, by the way. We'll be breaking that down and why that's so important as we get closer to the Senior Bowl, which is just about a week away. I love the Senior Bowl so much, or not a week away, a couple weeks away, but still. But so there's a lot of options for the Saints to be able to improve their offensive coordinator spot, improve their offense, get things going, and that becomes a part of it. But if they want to really, really get things going, it's not just offensive coordinator on the offensive side. They need to figure out the quarterback situation as well. And figuring out the quarterback situation gets a little bit easier once the Saints trade Sean Payton. That's point number 2 in today's episode of the things that the New Orleans Saints need to do in order to make the playoffs in 2023. So we're going to get to that coming up next. It feels like one of the 4 teams that was in on Sean Payton might have dropped out of the race or might be on the way out of the race. I don't know. They're very obviously missing all of a sudden. So let's discuss the impact of that and why it might make things a little bit more challenging for the New Orleans Saints to move on from Sean Payton this offseason. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by Ultimate Pro Football GM, my favorite mobile game in the whole entire world. You've heard me talk about this game a ton, and I can't help but tell you how much fun I'm having competing against my fellow Locked On NFL hosts and things like that. But now it's your turn to compete as well. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. Let me tell you about this game. If you've ever dreamed of being a NFL GM or managing your own football franchise, well, your dream can come true with Ultimate Pro Football GM. It puts you in the driver's seat and allows you to be able to control your destiny for your franchise by hiring the right coaches and coordinators, trading players, managing the salary cap, making draft picks, all of that. So there's a ton for you to check out. So if you're into it, here's the thing. Soon, Locked On Saints fans are going to be able to join Ultimate Pro Football GM and be a part of our special competition where you can win some amazing monthly prizes. So make sure you're staying tuned to the show for those details in upcoming episodes. Right now, though, Locked On Saints listeners can get a 100% free boost to your franchise when you use the promo code Locked On in all caps in the game store. That's Locked On, all caps in the game store. So make sure you go and check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up in the App Store. That's ultimate-gm.com or Ultimate Pro Football GM in your App Store. Start your dynasty today. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Did the Arizona Cardinals just drop out of the Sean Payton sweepstakes? Because ain't nobody talking about them anymore. And that would be an interesting sort of development for this conversation as the Saints desperately need to move Sean Payton this offseason. Appreciate you as always making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to also go and check out Locked On NFL as well. Boop, 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 right down there so that you can catch up with everything going on around the NFL in around 30 minutes. You can find it on your app store, or not your app store, sorry. You can find it wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube as well. So the Arizona Cardinals are just kind of missing all of a sudden when it comes to the Sean Payton conversations. Remember they hired their general manager just a few days ago. He kind of comes up, he does this weird press conference about how, there won't be any egos allowed in their organization and blah, blah, blah. And all of it just felt a little weird because one of the things that separated the Arizona Cardinals from the Denver Broncos, Carolina Panthers, and Houston Texans, who are all involved in the sort of Sean Payton sweepstakes, if you will, is that they had an open general manager spot. And that would have allowed Sean, who wants that triumvirate, right? Wants the head coach, general manager, owner relationship to be really specific. He wants that to be in good health. That's how it was here in New Orleans. He wants that same thing wherever he goes next. So he would have been able to kind of come in, bring in his own guy, a Jeff Ireland or a Kai Harley, and then end up having sort of that triumvirate that he was looking for, right? That three-headed dragon or whatever that he was looking for. Hydra? I don't know. Anyway, now the Arizona Cardinals just went and filled the position. And now you're hearing guys like Ian Rappaport, for instance, over at NFL Network talk about the three teams in the race, right? And Sean Payton, we know, met with the Houston Texans on Zoom, by the way. Really? Houston on Zoom? Sean Payton? Okay. And then also went out and interviewed with the Denver Broncos. That happened Tuesday night or Tuesday evening, afternoon, whatever, in Los Angeles. And then Friday is headed to Manhattan, New York City, to meet with David Tepper of the Carolina Panthers. But we have no idea when, where, if the Arizona Cardinals meeting is still happening. So really interesting stuff. So there's kind of two sides to this, right? There's some things that work out in the benefit of the New Orleans Saints. The Arizona Cardinals wouldn't have been able to give up the draft capital that the New Orleans Saints want, which is a first-round pick for Sean Payton. I know a lot of people have talked themselves into wanting the number 3 overall selection, but that doesn't mean that the Saints were going to get the number 3 overall selection. That was very unlikely to happen in the first place. And so they really didn't have the compensation that the Saints were looking for from the beginning. They kind of would have had to trade that early second round selection and then maybe a 2024 first or something like that. But is that enough? Is that enough for what you're looking for here? Sean Payton, the other thing here is that you don't run the risk of Sean Payton lifting one of your key front office members like a Jeff Ireland or a Kai Harley, right? Now you don't have to worry about that as much. Now those guys are probably going to get looks elsewhere, but most of the GM positions that have been open are starting to fill up. The Titans just filled theirs, Arizona filled theirs. So there's still chances here that the other positions come open, but so far so good. But the thing that does make this a little bit challenging for the Saints is that that's 25% of the teams that were in on Sean Payton that might no longer be in on Sean Payton. Now, now let me not report here saying that the Arizona Cardinals are no longer a part of the conversation. They might be. I'm just asking questions because I don't even see him anymore. Like, no one's talking about him anymore. Ain't nobody uttered the Cardinals' name outside of Cardinals fans and Saints fans, but in reports, they're gone. And I can't figure out why, aside from maybe Sean was a little peeved around the idea that they hired a general manager without talking to him, that he wanted to bring his own guy. That was the thing that made them unique. Like, maybe that's out of the question. So we'll just have to wait and see, I guess. Maybe they're just playing it close to the vest right now. Maybe they were just hyper focused on general manager first, and then now they'll get to Sean and everything. I'm waiting right now to see. I'm just double checking. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see me checking my phone. I'm like sitting here talking about it, and I'm like, okay, well, let me make sure nothing's going on with the Arizona Cardinals. But like, there's nothing out there. There's nothing about I got a lot of notifications. Ain't none of them about the Arizona Cardinals. So I don't know but that makes things a little bit more challenging because again, that's 25% fewer teams than those that were originally in on Sean Payton. But the two teams that seem to be at the top are the Houston Texans and the Denver Broncos. I think I'd put the Denver Broncos at 1, the Houston Texans at 2, and then the Carolina Panthers currently at 3. And then I guess that puts the Arizona Cardinals as question mark, because we don't know when, if, how, where, whether or not that meeting's actually going to take place. So we'll see there. But this is something that the Saints need to do this offseason. They need to trade Sean Payton this offseason. They could wait until next offseason, but the draft capital is not going to be the same. Right now, you're trading a guy that's on 2 years worth of a deal. Next year, you'd be trading a guy that's on 1 year worth of a deal. All these other things. Like, there's just a lot of different pieces to this that end up kind of dropping his draft value or the draft capital value that you could get back for him. Like, no matter what, you're trading Sean Payton. So you're going to get a good return. But Sean doesn't, this is the same thing as a John Gruden situation. This is something that Nick Underhill observed, is that, like, this isn't a John Gruden situation to where a team is taking you from an organization and is saying, we're giving the organization this much money to get them to let you go. The Saints, he doesn't work for the Saints. Like, he's not the Saints head coach right now. He's under contract, but he's not the Saints coach. Dennis Allen is the coach. Saints have already moved on. They're already building, they're already looking at and evaluating their coaching staff, all these other things. But as of right now, there's just not that, pull, that draw in terms of saying, like, okay, well, we're going to overpay because we're trying to get him. We're trying to buy him from you. That's not the case when it comes to Sean Payton. But one way or another, the Saints need to figure this out, or they need to get him back in New Orleans, right? It's got to be one of the two, but that seems very, very unlikely. I would say that he ends up back in a Fox studio far before he ends up back in New Orleans. And so, although pleasant surprises are never a bad thing. And so, I just think that as you look at this, the Saints need to figure out a way to get this done this season. And the teams that I would consider the front runners are still there: Denver Broncos, Houston Texans, but they got to get it done now. Why do they need to get this trade done? Another piece of it is that they need to rebuild their roster, right? Like, the Saints are in a rebuild. Like, let's just call it what it is. They don't have a quarterback right now going into 2023 that we're sure about. Maybe Jameis Winston comes back. Maybe he doesn't. He is a post-June 1 salary cap saver, all these other things. So there's a lot of different ways that this could go. He was publicly frustrated with the way that things played out, him losing his job while he was injured early on in the season, things like that, his words. And so I don't know. I don't know where that all lays out. But as of right now, the Saints don't have a for sure 100% answer at quarterback that we know of, right? They might know of it. We don't know of it. So for the Saints, they need this draft capital in order to rebuild. And if you're looking for a quarterback, you're rebuilding. It's that simple. And so that's where the New Orleans Saints should go next. Whatever picks they get for Sean Payton, they should look at investing in a quarterback in this year's draft. They can go out and get a veteran guy, whether it be via trade, whether it be via free agency. But the Saints have to take that Sean Payton draft capital and turn it into a young quarterback. But it doesn't mean they have to draft one. We'll discuss that as we continue on and break and finish up today's episode of Locked On Saints. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Bet Online, your number one source for all of your sports wagering needs. You want odds, lines, props? They got them. You want news, articles, scores? They got them. You want sports podcasts? Because I know you love sports podcasts. Guess what? They got them. The quickest and easiest way to get caught up on all the trends in action actually would be the Bet Online series of podcasts that they have available. You should also check out everything else that they've got going on in terms of end-of-year awards, NBA odds, MLB odds, with the MLB season getting closer and closer and closer, the NHL season. I mean, there's so much for you to check out, including like horse racing, golf. I think they've even got like disc golf or something like that as well. There's a whole bunch of stuff there, and even esports. So make sure you go and check them out today. It's Bet Online. You can find them on your mobile device, your laptop, your desktop, whatever it is that you use to browse the internet. Just head over to betonline.net today, where the game starts. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with a quick look at what the New Orleans Saints need to do after they trade Sean Payton. Now, in my little text box over here on the side on today's show, it says draft a quarterback. Well, I'm going to caveat that. The Saints could also utilize that draft capital and just turn it into a quarterback. So that means they could get draft capital for the Sean Payton trade and then trade that draft capital for a quarterback, for a team that's maybe looking to sell off a quarterback. Let's say the Chicago Bears do decide that they want to draft a quarterback. Well, they could do that. They hold the number one overall selection. They can do whatever they want. If they go that route, they could then look to trade Justin Fields. So how about a draft day trade? The Chicago Bears draft, let's say, Bryce Young at number 1, And before the Saints pick at 12, or if he goes to the Houston Texans, or in the late 20s if Sean Payton goes to the Denver Broncos, they trade that pick and maybe a fifth or something like that, or maybe even a second and a fifth, honestly, to the Chicago Bears for Justin Fields. And then they get Justin Fields. They probably have some additional day 2 draft capital that they got from the trade. And then they could also draft a quarterback if they wanted to, right? But there are ways for the New Orleans Saints to turn this draft capital into a quarterback. It could be that. It could be Aaron Rodgers. It could be Derek Carr. It could be, anybody out there that could potentially be getting sold off. It could be a Mac Jones if the New England Patriots really, really like Bailey Zappi, or if Tom Brady goes back to New England or something crazy like that happens, right? Like, there's a lot of different ways after we get through free agency that some of these quarterbacks could potentially become available. Now, you might not be a fan of Justin Fields. You might not be a fan of Derek Carr. You might not be a fan of Aaron Rodgers. I'm just using those as examples. The Saints could do just about whatever they wanted if they get the draft capital that they want, right? They can explore all of those different options, though. Or they could turn to the draft. And they could draft. Let's say they fall in love with Max Duggan out of TCU. They could draft him at the end of the first round. Let's say they fall in love with Will Levis or Anthony Richardson. If they were selecting at 12 because they trade Sean Payton to the Houston Texans, they could package that 12 and a next year one, or package that 12 and a 2 from this year, and move up a few spots to make sure that they grab that third quarterback off the board, or that fourth quarterback off the board. There's a lot of different ways that the Saints can win their draft, reload their quarterback room, prepare themselves for the future. Even if somebody's not ready to go day one, that doesn't matter right now. That's not where you are, right? You're not in a situation to where I think the Saints are going to be smart, are going to get smart and go and try to get Lamar Jackson in New Orleans. You have other holes around the roster that you have to take care of before you do that. You have $50 million over the salary cap before you get there. Now, look, the Saints cleared out a ton of money to go after Deshaun Watson, so why not clear that money to try to go after Lamar Jackson either? Don't get me wrong. But there's a lot of different ways for the Saints to go about that. And that's another way they could take that draft capital and turn it into a quarterback. Let's say that the Baltimore Ravens decide that they want to tag and trade Lamar Jackson. Well, you got to clear a lot of salary cap space in order to make room for that. But if you can, and then you have draft capital, try to trade for Lamar Jackson. Try whatever you can. And that was something that Dennis Allen mentioned, right? When he said, they're going to leave no stone unturned. They're going to go after everything that they can when it comes to finding their answer to quarterback. And that should mean the guys that are in-house. That will mean the guys that are presently on other teams. That will mean the guys that are not presently on other teams, or guys on expiring contracts. Or it'll mean guys that are in the NFL draft right now, or that will be in the NFL draft. And because of what we just discussed earlier today with Ronald Curry, their quarterback coach and passing game coordinator, being the offensive coordinator for the Senior Bowl, he's going to get a really, really, really up close and personal look at guys like Max Duggan, guys like Jaren Hall, guys like Jake Haener from Fresno State, who might not be a second-round pick or a third-round pick. He's probably a day 3 pick, but they want to roll the dice late. They can. They should. The Washington Commanders, in their previous form, did that when they drafted Robert Griffin III and Alex Smith. Who was their quarterback forever? Alex Smith. So there's a lot of different ways that the Saints can go about turning this draft capital into quarterbacks. But that is kind of the next checkbox, right? Fix the offense. And a lot of that starts at offensive coordinator. Don't miss on the Sean Payton trade, right? Not only do you need to trade him, but you need to get a return back that's worth it. And then take whatever that return is and turn it into a quarterback. That's an excellent way for the Saints to deal with the fact that they traded away this year's first-round pick in order to advance it to last year, which worked out pretty well for them in terms of Chris Olave. We'll see what it works out for in terms of Trevor Penning. But if the kid stays healthy, he's going to be very good. We've seen that already. He played an excellent game against the Carolina Panthers. I had him graded out as either A, B, or C, C being a stalemate, on every snap except for a 1, where he got beat badly on the inside. But hey, I'll take 1 snap. No problem. So for the Saints, if they can turn all of this around, or if they're going to try to turn all of this around, they need to turn these things around first. Offensive coordinator, turning around Sean Payton for meaningful draft capital, and then turning around their quarterback room. If they can get those 3 things right this offseason, that's a good start for them getting into the playoffs. There's more. They got to fix defensive interior. They need to find more talent at wide receiver, especially if they lose Michael Thomas, so on and so forth. Like, there's a lot of different things that they're also going to have to get right. It's one of the reasons why I kind of hesitate around like the Lamar Jackson idea. But hey, do you go after whoever, right? You have a Lamar Jackson. Maybe you don't need any more wide receivers. You got the 2 speedy guys that can catch passes deep downfield. You've got, these guys that can work underneath. You've got Alvin Kamara. Okay, fine. Go out there and have fun. But I do think that possession receiver is helpful. You got to bring back Juwan Johnson. You got to bring back Caden Ellis, blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of different ones. In fact, we'll keep this going as a series. Like, what do the Saints need to get right in order to get back to the postseason? I also have a piece up over at saintswire.usatoday.com if you want to check that out. All right, y'all. More change coming to the background here over on the video side. More stuff coming here on the show. Coming up tomorrow, hopefully an update for you on Thursday around the New Orleans Saints making some changes on their coaching staff, getting things done. We haven't really seen anything start to move yet, but it doesn't mean that it won't. So we'll just continue to keep you updated on all of that. And I'll answer the question tomorrow. Why should you be excited for 2023 New Orleans Saints football? Like, let's just get down to brass tacks. Why should you be excited about it? I'm going to tell you why in tomorrow's episode. Appreciate you so much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, every day for your second listen. Make sure you go and check out Locked On NFL as well. Everything you need around the NFL in less than 30 minutes, or right around 30 minutes. Make sure you go check them out wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube as well. Appreciate you so much for making me a part of your day, part of your routine. Hope you like the shirt today. I love this shirt. This is one of my favorites. And I appreciate you, as always, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation, I'll holla at you.